Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. That's your host here, Matt Zahab. We are buzzing as always. And folks, we got the one and only coming back for round two. I had this lad on, I think probably 1.5, 2 years ago. He brought the noise the first time. He's going to bring the noise again. And his company is in the news, getting in that strategic reserve from the big orange man south of the border. Today, we have Frederik Gregaard back on the show today, the man with the best beard in all of crypto Twitter, all of Twitter for that matter, all of crypto for that matter. Wow, talk much, a little early in the morning for me. He's the CEO of the Cardano Foundation, the Swiss-based non-profit organization which exists to ensure the advancement of the Cardano protocol, while also contributing to the positive advancement of blockchain as a world-changing tech. He's a leader in fintech and blockchain and previously served as director and head of digital in PwC's financial services advisory practice and director of head of institutional business at Saxo Bank Switzerland. Pumped to have you on again. Fred, welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing amazing, and thank you for having me. That was a lot of words coming out of your mouth very fast.
It's 9 a.m. for me. Just, a bit of a rough night here in Mexico, and I need some more coffee, mate. But before we get into everything, you got to give us the beard routine here. How the hell do you get such a nice beard? And I'm like you, I can grow a beard, but mine doesn't. You got like a nice like Viking beard. Like if I saw you on the street, I'd be like, this guy's got a good beard, and I probably wouldn't mess with him. Like what's the key to maintaining such a good beard there?
I honestly, I don't know. I mean, probably around 20 years ago, I lost the hair on the top, and somewhere after that, I was, it looked a bit hairless, right? So, I started to grow a beard, and it's been bigger, it's been smaller. I had some handlebars at a certain time, and I actually don't even go that often to the barber, so it's mainly just the scissors and give it a good scrubbing. But I took a DNA test. It's actually quite hard to get a DNA test if you're in crypto, right? Because one of the things we're really concerned about in crypto is our identity, right? And we want to really ensure that nobody actually has our identity or our biological markers, right? But I found a really good company who did that, and they basically told me you're 99.9% Viking. So maybe some genes.
Oh, that's incredible. That's awesome. Let's start with the biggest news here. Again, by the time this episode airs, it will be the following week. But over the weekend, I believe it was the 1st or 2nd of March, Donald Trump announced on the weekend, on a Sunday, he announced the strategic crypto reserve, gave the market a little bit of a pump. And a quick side note to that, it may have been his son, Donald Jr., it may have been someone, but someone knew this news and took out a $200 million long on ETH and Bitcoin. And we can get into that too. But Cardano, one of the coins that was on there, the big three, you had XRP, you had ADA, you guys obviously, you had Solana. And then he later said, of course, we are going to add Ethereum and Bitcoin. This is incredible news for you guys. All 5 of the coins got a little rip. The 3 sort of bigger altcoins, and you guys, Solana, and of course XRP got the biggest rip. How incredible was that? Did you guys sort of know this was happening? Was this just like a holy crap, this happened? Walk me through that whole process, and how pumped is your team to know that you guys will be in the crypto strategic reserve?
So we did not know that this was happening on that particular Sunday, right? So, but it's no secret that we've been working since I arrived 5 years ago, and there's been people before me. We've always been working on positioning Cardano in a very serious light, right? We've not been down ever. So we have a track record from 2017, the only one who's exceeding us in Bitcoin, right? So in terms of, if you're thinking about it from a risk management perspective and you want to do a strategic reserve, right? You want something where you know that it also has value tomorrow, but you don't wake up one day and the technology doesn't work, right? Another part of it is, of course, has been all our governance work. And I think specifically around Bitcoin, you can say there's no political fractions around Bitcoin here, right? And you can actually say the same with Cardano. I don't decide, Charles don't decide, nobody decides, the community decide. We are actually so far now, since I spoke to you last time, that we are the world's largest DAO with 9 million citizens. And when you buy ADA, you actually get citizens' rights. And those citizens' rights gives you the ability to build up an economic identity where you can verify who you are in economic transactions or other things like that. But it also gives you voting power. And since we spoke last time, we actually are so far now that we have, when I say we, the community, we also contributed to that, right? have written a constitution. So we went to Buenos Aires with nearly 40 different nationalities, and we went through every single line of the constitution, the context of the constitution, put it all together, and got it ratified using solid digital identity. So we have a fully working constitution, and a huge part of that exists on chain, which is really unique. So we have a tri-party government, right? And then besides that, as you know, the Cardano Foundation, and part of my contribution has been to work with the global regulators, policymakers, central banks, national banks, and so forth in the last 5 years to ensure that they understand the seriousity, the technology stack, but also the different use cases there's around Cardano. And I think that's sort of where the biggest difference is between Bitcoin and us. We have borrowed some of the primitives from Bitcoin and built it out, not with the notion that ADA should be a standalone asset class like Bitcoin, but built on that Cardano is about programmable, not just finance, but programmable target operating models. I think a lot of the work we've been doing suddenly spiked up into mainstream media on that Sunday with that particular statement.
That's amazing. Fred, walk me through some of these conversations that you guys have. Because again, I'm very fortunate to have some incredible guests like yourself come on the show. Not a lot of them, a very select few of them do have the opportunity to work with, national regulators. And I'm always, I guess, curious is the right word to understand and to know like what goes on in these conversations. I feel like a good chunk of it is educational, like a lot of them want to learn more about crypto, more about, Cardano, ADA, however you want to pronounce it. But like, what exactly do these conversations sound like? Like, why do they want to jump in bed with you guys and learn more about the space?
So if you may, I can use an example from last week. It's always good to do a bit of storytelling, right? So we actually have close to 1.5 billion ADA, and with the current price of ADA, it's probably talking about $1.3 billion in a decentralized treasury, which is being managed by a process we call Catalyst. Catalyst is the opportunity that everybody has, is a grant mechanism, but it is also a mechanism to extrapolate amazing teams who deliver Web3 native topics, right? And it's been really magnificent to see, because one of the things I've been doing a lot is to speak to regulators and policymakers and so on. And I will answer your question in a second, right? But suddenly there was a team, of community members who said, we want to help you, Fred. We want to be a part of this. We can do this as well. So they actually made a Catalyst proposal and got funded. And based on that, they basically did something called a Global Regulators Digital Asset Conference. So we were at the House of Lords, which is a part of the UK Parliament, last week, where I met with global regulators from Ukraine, the Senate in the US, the European Parliament, Gibraltar, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Germany, and so on. And we're sitting in this Harry Potter building, really, right? It's like walking into Harry Potter, right? You have this palace and you cannot take pictures, right? And you're in these really ancient, hallways, and there's, armor and swords and stuff like that, right? And you're sitting there, and there is no journalist there present, right? And you have a very frank discussion about, digital assets, operational resilience, collaboration across different machines, but also about incentives. And one of the things, which I'm sort of really proud about is not just that I did not arrange this. It was one of our community members who did that, right? But I was invited there on equal footing as many others. But we were only 2 people from industry. The rest was policymakers, members of parliament, etc. And what they really appreciate with Cardano is transparency, our honesty, but also that we actually take the time to contribute to some of these global initiatives like IOSCO and like BIS and others. When they go out and they change global regulation, they sometimes ask, what is people's view? And when you go in on the BIS webpage, maybe we can leave a link in your show notes, right? You can actually see that the people who answer there is like the Global Banking Society and all these kind of really big ones. You also see Google answering, right? And then you see Cardano Foundation. But the fact that we actually try our best to understand the current regulatory framework, and then we give an opinion about what would it look like in a blockchain-enabled world, where blockchain enable all industries, improves transparency, improves accountability, and fights for a human-enabled society in an AI-dominated world backed by the security of blockchain. What would that look like? And what kind of global regulation would you need? And when I say global, a lot of them, that's not their mandate. Their mandate is local regulation to protect the citizens or the businesses in their country. Some of them, so it's risk management basically, right? Some of them has a slightly different mandate. It's also about attracting new businesses, right? So you think about small countries, they want to attract businesses. And now we have a very large country, the USA, who is suddenly also saying, no, we want to attract business. We want to be number one in AI and we want to be number one in blockchain, right? So they're now also starting to look at regulation as, can regulation not just enable innovation, but can it also attract a growth in GDP? Can it, ensure that we don't have a brain drain, but we are becoming an attractive country for talent? And how can we build an economy where the center base of some of these emerging technologies is in that country? And when I then come in and speak about, that's not okay. You cannot look at it from one country and that's all that matters. What you need to look at right now is you need to look at how these things carries across the borders, is because what we saw through COVID is that our global supply chains are dependable on each other. We have very few places where someone can live isolated in the community and live on those, bespoke resources available. That means that everything we do today is interconnected with each other. On top of that, AI, blockchain, I was using the example, which is called CRISPR-Cas9, which is a gene coding technology, right? This doesn't respect borders. When you change the genes in a rat and make it fluorescent, and it goes out of the laboratory, right? It doesn't know that there's a national border there. It will go into another country, right? It will breed, and then suddenly you change the DNA, right? And therefore, from my point of view, one of the largest challenges we have right now from a regulatory and policy-making perspective is how can we get these things to add together to improve humanity at large and put humanity first, not technology first. And what does it mean when we talk about technology for good and blockchain for good? Not asymmetric wealth generation for the few people or asymmetric power for very few people based on them getting more and more power, right? And that's a very different argumentation line than what many are used to. Also because I can back it up. I was part of the MiCA, which is the European stablecoin regulation. I was part of those discussions, right? I was been part of many of those things, also the token terminology in Switzerland and so on. So the fact that we know quite well how the current regulation, the current frameworks, the current, dependencies between the countries, and then we add blockchain with real world like implementations from the National Space Agency to this amazing hoodie I'm wearing here with a passive radio beacon here, right? Which you can scan and you can see basically the impact on Mother Earth when it was produced, and you can see the ISO certification that no child labor was used and so on, right? How do we start changing those things? That's basically, I believe, one of the reasons why we are being invited to some of those conversations, because it's not a given. You have to earn those things.
I love that. So you take more of the strict, almost non-crypto angle in there, the non-blockchain angle, the humanitarian expertise aspects. We know how the governance works. We know how the regulatory landscape and aspects are. And then once you're in the door, then it's like, hey, and by the way, blockchain tech can solve a lot of these problems and is the solution to a lot of these problems. Am I getting that right? Is that sort of the angle in there?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm a very big believer in cryptocurrency, right? But I'm also an economist and I'm an infrastructure banker, right? So I built central banks rails. I built interbank settlement rails, right? So when we're having these discussions, I don't go in and say, oh, we can make it better, faster, cheaper, because you know what? We can't. That's not what blockchain does.
Yeah.
Blockchain is not better, faster, cheaper when you compare a transaction rail on a centralized infrastructure compared to a decentralized infrastructure like Cardano. Now, what it does do, however, which has a much larger value, is it changes the operating model and it allows us to add features. And those features allows politicians and mayors in cities and others to enhance what they can do for the people living in that society. It allows us the ability, for instance, in banking to add 2 billion people to our market, right? So instead of fighting for, let's say, I'm in Switzerland right now, let's figure out what we can do with a market of 9 million people. I'm coming to the table and say, what happens if we add 2 billion people to that? How would you regulate that? How would you protect that? What would growth look like? What would that mean to the treasury of the country, right? If you could start opening up for something like that. And that, I think, is net positive.
Yeah, 100%. Wow, Fred, you're on an absolute roll here. We're going to take a quick break, give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show. When we get back, we're going to continue to focus on a little bit of regulatory landscape, Cardano's future roadmap and priorities, and of course the foundation's role in the Cardano ecosystem growth. Until then, huge shout out to Prime XBT, longtime friends and longtime sponsors of the Crypto News podcast. We love these guys and gals as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XBT is also running an exclusive promo for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. Use the promo code CryptoNews50, that is CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Again, that is CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Now back to the show with Fred. Let's talk about, just jump right into the Cardano Foundation for a second. Again, a lot of people, I don't want to say confused, but like every one of the big cryptocurrencies, you need a foundation just for regulatory. You don't think so?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. But there is some maturity going on here, right? And we were very early, right? So actually, the first iteration. Yeah, go ahead.
Why does everyone have? Well, I'll let you speak here. But why does every single one of the big dogs have a foundation if you don't think it's needed?
Well, because in 2015, right, there was a couple of things happening there. So at that time, I was working for a bank and I was helping the early Bitcoiners to get bank accounts. Now, I couldn't do that for my bank I was working for because there was a circular from the European Central Bank who basically said that Bitcoin is bad, is only about Silk Road, and is about anti-money laundering, and therefore I couldn't touch that. I got a direct order, don't touch it. But because I was already building rails for banks, I had good access to banks, right? And there was a very early, one of the earliest Bitcoin sort of companies called Bitcoin Suisse. So they came first to Switzerland, right? Because basically the regulator says you can be here, but don't make any problems, right? Which is very typical Swiss, right? So, if you play by the rules and you don't know any problems, you're very welcome here, right? There's an established set of rules. You don't seem to be breaking them, right? It's just a new technology. You're more than welcome. Now, very shortly after, in 15, right, the Ethereum Foundation came about, right? And the Ethereum Foundation has been shopping for a while for a new home, right? For a home where they could build the next generation of Wall Street, a decentralized version of Wall Street, which could prove to the world that you don't need restrictions on what we think about as capital allocation or capital. Basically how it works in banking is that one of the superpowers banks has is not to protect your money, but is to direct your money. So when you think about what the superpower of a bank is it has like 1 million clients, and they can say, oh, all your clients, you buy this stock or you go into this fund and so on, right? So the direction of capital is one of the superpowers. And I think one of the things the Ethereum Foundation was really dabbling with back then is there a way we can do capital aggregation outside the controls of the direction of the banking system, which is truly unique, right? And back then there was a company with Lucas, it was called MME, which is a law firm in Switzerland. And they became the lawyers of Ethereum before there was a foundation. Back then, it was actually just a limited liability company, right? And they basically said, okay, we also do see that there is some regulatory issues here because it's a little bit unclear about decentralization and is this a security or not. So the original idea was that the foundation would create sort of a liability umbrella or like a shield, a first engagement shield. Think about if you play one of these first-person shooter games, right? You can take a couple of shots and before it goes through your armor, right?
Yeah.
To basically say, well, nobody owns us. We don't optimize towards one central, set of investors, right?
Yeah.
So there was a couple of things with the Swiss Foundation, which was very good. And the Swiss Foundation is actually under a regulatory authority called ESAP, which is the Foundation Supervisory Authorities. Where, by the way, which is a bit scary, where we have personal liability. So even though I don't break any civil right rules or criminal right rules, break any normal laws, I have full personal liability if I divert from the original intent of the foundation, right? So that was...
You do?
I do, yeah. together
Wow.
with the
I
board.
didn't, that's
Yeah, no,
wild.
it's actually it's
Wow.
actually a little bit scary when you kind of think about it, right? Because there's nothing I can do. You cannot really insure about it. You can get something called a DoD insurance, which insures to a certain amount, but you have unlimited personal liability in this setup. Huh?
Wow.
It's quite wild, right? So there's a trade-off here. Now, this actually worked pretty well, right? So this really good law firm, they basically made this template for the Ethereum Foundation, and the Ethereum Foundation, launched the first version of Ethereum, and it got kind of a lot of adoption to start with, right? It really, it closed the gap, and I think what Ethereum really has done is just proven that yes, we can operate, capital aggregation and distribution outside Wall Street. Yes, we can raise money. Yes, we can do escrows. We can do structured products. We can do all the instruments of the financial world. We can wrap into smart contracts, right? So amazing world there, right? Now, the next sort of level or next version of all of these blockchains, they were then looking at saying, you know what, we take a page out of the Ethereum Foundation because, they were trying to do something like this liability umbrella, this shield, right? And why don't we just do the same? Now, we are now 10 years later, right? And we have some hard learnings. Some of those learnings is, of course, somebody has now tried to do that in Singapore. Somebody is doing that in the US.
Yeah.
There's been sort of, I wouldn't call it regulatory arbitrage, but let's say regulatory opportunistic behavior, right? So many people said, okay, this creates jobs. In Switzerland, we created thousands of companies, right, in Crypto Valley, and we call it Blockchain Nation now, right? So it created thousands of jobs. It created, incorporations. It created, attraction of foreign talent. It basically created taxpayer revenue, right? Amazing, right? So a lot of people have taken that model and said, we want to do that something locally. But when you look at where we are today, right, I would argue that what happens is that we also understand now that maximal decentralization is not necessarily where we want to go. We want to have something which is extremely decentralized due to it gives us added security on the infrastructure layer. It also ensures that you cannot do a one-person takeover, and a part of what we stand for and originally we were fighting for, and I still fight for, is this, this fight against big tech, this fight against that very few people control the world, right? I want to give opportunities to the whole world, right? But you have to think twice when you do a foundation setup, right? Because what are you trying to achieve? Today, we have so good blockchain protocols like Cardano, which is full open source, which you can basically copy paste, and you can spin up a fully decentralized blockchain tomorrow using a combination of maybe glacial drops and some hard work in Web 2 to generate a community, right? So actually, we're doing that right now. When I say we, the Cardano ecosystem is doing that right now on a layer 2 solution called Midnight, where basically there are going to be a drop on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Cardano, which allows people to claim a token, and only when an amount of wallets, I think the current number we're aiming for is over 50,000, right, is doing that action of claiming the token, new blockchain spins up automatically decentralized. And what's the difference? Well, before, when you had Ethereum or you had even Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin started centralized by one person building the code, deploying it. But what Bitcoin did different than many of the other blockchains was that, Satoshi gave away the control of the network before it had any value, right? When you build something who has a market cap of 30 billion or 50 billion or 300 billion, it's really hard to give it away, right? Because you're so associated with it and you're so proud and so on, right? And I think that's so unique about Cardano, right? We gave, when I say we, Charles and the original founders, they gave Cardano away to the community with a market cap over 30 billion, right? And created decentralized governance there. And I think that's truly unique. So what I'm trying to say right now is, I actually think you should think twice if you want to create a new blockchain, if you actually need a foundation. Because what we were struggling with back then was, how can you create something which is decentralized from day one, which means that you had a gap where you wanted to protect the original founders or the original contributors, right? Until you had decentralization. And now you actually have a maturity around the technology stack, which allows you to have different tools in your toolbox to create something which is fairly distributed from day one. Plus, you have a completely new regulatory environment. You have a regulatory environment which is way more comfortable. I'm not saying that they
accepting.
always approve, but it's way more
Yeah.
comfortable with this notion of that.
Yeah.
On top of that, you have people like me who doesn't give up fighting, right? So we are actually right now, we have a project where we are challenging that gets very nerdy. So just stop me, Matt, if it's not interesting, right? But we are challenging what's called the risk mitigation framework of critical infrastructure in the world. So it is so that as you have an audit framework for financials, right? You also have a framework where if you have national critical infrastructure, telco, sewage lines, internet, food provision lines, things who basically, if these things doesn't work, electricity, your society crumbles, right? Some of that is also, I don't know exactly why, right? But some of this is also public stocks and other things. So if you think about a stock exchange and banking is also under this framework. How it is today is that you need to get an auditor in who basically says your risk mitigation framework is okay in accordance to the regulation. And what they look at is, for instance, the endpoint of your servers, right? So they look very much about you have a centralized data architecture. It might be in the cloud, it might not be in the cloud. And then are you in control of all the attack vectors, right? When you look at the corporate governance, when you look at the disaster recovery, when you look at all those things who can, ensure that your internet or electricity or something goes down, have you mitigated the foreign risk of a default scenario, right? Now, the way blockchain works is completely different, right? We don't have a centralized endpoint. In Cardano, we have over 3,000 anonymous stakepool operators who gets up in the middle of the night and do bug finding, who resets the nodes, who comes together in small clusters and do white hacking and all those kind of things. And one of the security features is that they're anonymous. But according to the normal risk mitigation framework, you actually have to identify them, not due to AML, but due to you need to know what processes they have in place. Do they have extra batteries if there's no electricity to run the servers? What's the backup internet connection? All those things. But we have redesigned, not just Cardano, but we've redesigned the architecture of security of the internet. That's what blockchain really does. And that's now coming in under the hat of thousands of companies on Cardano, but even more on Ethereum, even more on Avalanche and so forth, right? And we're now fighting for all blockchain to ensure that we can change this risk mitigation framework by proving to the world methodology holders, so the people who decide how this is done, right, that this is actually better. And you know what? We can prove it, right? We can prove it because we have Bitcoin and we have Cardano, who's never been down, right? We've been just under attack from the same, we presume, you never really know, right? But we're quite certain it's the same fraction who did this big hack of an exchange, which was in the news a couple of weeks back, right? We were under attack. We were under attack for 9 months. So actually the National Security Agency called the local police here in Switzerland, and the local police said, we never got a call from these guys. What are you actually doing, Cardano Foundation, right? Because we were under a full frontal attack, both in the blockchain, but also on our centralized infrastructure, which we run, salaries and other things. But luckily, I'm quite far ahead. So I'm already, working on changing that. I run a lot of our infrastructure centralized, right? Not the blockchain part, but, salaries and record keeping and those kind of things. But we're already moving some of that to the blockchain. So I don't know if you saw, but we already posted our balance sheet and our earnings statement on the Cardano blockchain. And we're working with our auditors to verify, and they can sign the numbers on the blockchain. And the idea is that we go so far that we publish all transactions, all financial transactions, from our rent in this building to credit cards and so on. We'll post on our own blockchain to allow people to run machine learning and large language models on top of it, to basically turn everybody into being, bug hunters, right? Bug bounty hunters, right? Because then you actually get into a situation that you don't have to own all the shares of a company, or you don't have to be friends with Fred in Cardano or something to ask a question, right? You suddenly have the whole data foundation to be able to go digging into the financials. And now you're suddenly going to think about, it's no longer about, do I trust them? It's about, what's the truth? What's the truth of the financials? Who drives the company? What's the truth of the incentive structure, right? And then when you have the truth, you can discuss whether you trust it, right? Because then trust becomes associated not with, is it accurate, but trust becomes associated with your value as a human. Do you value X more than Z, right? And now we are touching the foundations of why people came together in companies and share work and share liability and share resources to do something. Sorry, that was a That was a bit much, huh?
I love it, Fred. No, that was awesome. Hey, you're making my job easy here, mate. Look, we are getting a little tight for time, and that was an incredible rip there. Drop some news for us before we let you go today. I mean, you guys are working on so many different things, so many different angles, so many different spectrums. Sort of pick and choose a couple of the big things that you want to drop to us before we let you go here today.
Yeah, so many of us as Bitcoiners at heart, right? And one of the things we are working with together with our community is the ability not to. We think that Bitcoin is a solid asset class who has a very good governance, which basically is basically this tug of war, right? So they're not changing anything because the value is so big and the code is so solid, and it's become this, really strong asset class. But what we really truly believe is that you can use the computational layer of Cardano and the smart contracts of Cardano, so more specifically the Eigen smart contracting language with the Ouroboros to secure it, to basically use Bitcoin as an asset class without putting it at risk. So think about a trustless bridge to the Bitcoin protocol. Instead of like restaking and those things people are exploring, we think about how do you keep Bitcoin pure, but make it programmable using Cardano. And I think that's if you start thinking about that, that's really amazing, because a lot of people has been thinking about, what about the US dollar, the reserve currency? What about the euro? What about structured products, real world asset tokenization, right? But I think if you can do that trustless between two blockchains like Cardano and Bitcoin, I think you have a fantastic value proposition who really proves that nothing can be left untouched. Another thing which we've been working quite hard on, and there will be some news coming out, right, is we're getting stronger and stronger into real world tokenization, right? Whether this hoodie I'm sitting with right now is actually powered by a passive beacon. So outside putting it in the microwave, you can actually, you can scan this hoodie and you can see it on the blockchain. You can see the footprint of it. You can see the ISO certifications and so on. And we are so far right now that it's a little bit on hold at the moment due to the new administration in the US. But we're actually working with the National Space Agency, so NASA, around some of these track and trace, not just from physical items like hoodies, but also about data and data provenance. One of the unique things you can do on Cardano, which you cannot do on any other blockchains, to my knowledge, of the big size, right, is something called Parisia Merkle trees. So we actually took the whole Bitcoin protocol and put it on Cardano. So every single Bitcoin transaction there ever was and there ever will be is automatically recorded on Cardano. This is really hard to do because, normally you take a data dump, right, and you keep to maintain it, right? But this idea that you have a flexible end date is very interesting. And what we're doing then is we're exploring everything from satellite data, which keeps updating with billions of time, right? Because then it becomes a provenance layer of data. And when you have a provenance layer of data, you have quality for the AI to train on, right? And you have reinsurance, and you have all those things which we've been dreaming about in blockchain for so long, right? And this only works if you can do that, I just told you, and the other one is identity. So we basically develop an identity wallet who works together with something called a legal entity identifier, which basically moves 80% of all world trade.
Wow.
80%.
That's wild.
So, and what we did is we did not build it on Cardano. We built it outside Cardano with the possibility of anchoring the security in Cardano, because I don't think it's about Cardano taking over the world. I think it's about interoperability. So every blockchain out there or every centralized entity out there, they can just go to my repo, they can take that out and they can use that. And it actually has some quantum resistant into it. So when you think about enterprise, you have something called AC/DC, which probably will a whole show for itself, right? Which basically is a better level of quantum security than what we have right now, where we just make the problem harder and harder, and we really need more computing power. So the way you rotate the top bit is the trick here. So I think this is going to be really powerful. And I'm already so happy because I see other blockchains and other centralized stacks. So other blockchains, decentralized, but also centralized computing stacks are starting to pay attention to this. And that means that I think I'm signing the NDA later today, so I can say it here, right? But even people like the Bank of International Settlement has now paid attention to it and say, hey, I think we can do something here, right?
Wow.
Because all the banks already have this type of identity, right? We just created a way to manage it and wrap it and to anchor it into Cardano or Ethereum or other blockchains, right? Or even an IBM stack, right? So I think this is also something you should really pay attention to, right? Because this is, if you're not already a Cardano fan, you can just take it and then use it for something else, right?
Yeah.
But this is how we're going to bridge the world together. Strong identity will allow us to get out of the echo chamber that it has to be on one blockchain, but it's about interoperability among different systems to really unleash the value, right? And then last but not least, agentic AI is a big theme, right? So we at the moment work with a couple of different companies, but I would like to highlight maybe one, which is called Masumi. So I did the announcement at the World Economic Forum. And what Masumi is doing is they're a quite large company. So the mother company is 7,000 people in Germany. They have really big clients like BMW, Lufthansa, and so on, right? So we're talking about like medium to large size companies. And they understand that the next generation of large language models, which is called agentic AI, is going to completely, again, revamp the user experience for clients. And if you don't want to be one large company serving everybody, but you want to have the ability to have these niche operators from loyalty points to local transportation to communication, etc., what you need is a way for AIs so they can speak together while still protecting privacy, right? They need to be able to identify themselves. Think the LEI again, right? So strong identity layer, right?
Yeah.
They need to be able to verify that not only they are who they are, but they also have access to the data they say they have, right? So if let's give an example. You want to go to Tokyo, right? So going to Tokyo, you want to optimize that based on your loyalty scheme for airlines, right? But you also have some specific dates. You have some hotels of choice you like, right? Depending if you go with your missus or not your missus, right? You have maybe some temples you want to see, right? You have, all those things. And they're from different providers today. And ideally speaking, you want those agentic AIs to speak together to optimize all of that for you without this company sharing their data about you with this company without your permission, right? And even though you don't buy that product, what you want is you want the databases, the companies to be incentivized by sharing that data, even though you don't buy, by a microtransaction, right? So, and that's all being secured by the Cardano blockchain. So that allows you basically to have AI speaking to AI secured by blockchain due to DITs and verified credentials with microtransactions, right? And privacy. So we can actually live in a world where we have choice of companies. Isn't that beautiful? We don't have to go to one company. We have choice based on our, our culture, our heart, our family, our community, our geographical location, right? We need to live in a world where humans are in charge, but we are powered by technology. Not that technology is charged and we are one of the products.
Well said. Mate, you know how to talk, man. You're quite the speaker. Love having you on. Love the riffs you go on. Always a pleasure. Can't wait for round 3. Before we let you go, please let our listeners know where they can find you personally and, of course, Cardano and the Cardano Foundation online and on socials.
Yeah, so I'm getting a bit better on Twitter. I'm still not reading Twitter, but I'm getting a bit better on posting. So feel free to find me my Twitter profile. I'm a bit better on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a bit slower. I like things who's a little bit slow in terms of media. I even like them even better if I can verify how the data comes to the place, right? That's why I like blockchain a lot. I like trust but verify. So definitely CardanoFoundation.org, and there you will find my Twitter profile, my LinkedIn profile. But I also do encourage you to go to Cardano.org and check out the amazing work from our community, because it's not about the Cardano Foundation. We're just one contributor to the world's largest DAO called Cardano, with a treasury of 1.5 billion ADA, with a constitution which is ratified, the most decentralized and most magnificent blockchain out there. So build, use, deploy, test, learn.
Folks, what an episode with Frederik Gregaard, CEO of the Cardano Foundation. We touched a little bit of everything: identity layers, Cardano's inclusion in the US Strategic Reserve, current market insights, vision for Cardano's institutional adoption, some views on regulatory landscape, midnight, creating something that's decentralized from day one, AI agents, and Cardano's roadmap. You name it, we touched it. Huge shout out to Fred and the team for making this happen. If you guys enjoyed this one, I hope you did. Please do subscribe. It would mean the world to my team and I. Speaking of the team, love you guys. Thank you so much for everything. And back to the listeners, keep on growing those bags and keep on staying happy, healthy, and wealthy. Love you guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Ciao.